Hey, welcome to part 4 of my Procedural Nodes series in Blender. This is the animation we're going to create today. Just one texture changing into another texture with this interesting distorted line running through the middle. So today we're going to work with a plane, and I'm going to bring in a material. This is the shader editor I've already got open on the left here. I'm going to delete this principled BDSF and bring in a texture coordinate node. Then I'm going to bring in a separate XYZ and plug in the object output into the vector input there. We're going to be running off of the X value there. And I'm going to bring in a math node, leave this on add, and set this to 1.2. And you can see if I decrease this 1.2 value, we've got that black moving from left to right. And that's the effect we want today here. But it's a little bit too much of a gradient here. I want this to be a bit tighter, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this math node, change this to multiply, and crank this up to 5. And now you can see as we move this across, it's much less of a gray value in between the pure black and the pure white. Next up, what we're going to do is duplicate this texture coordinate node and bring in a noise texture. This is the second time we've used a noise texture in this series here. Just trying to introduce stuff kind of slowly, but we're actually not going to change any of the settings here. We're going to leave everything as is with 520 for the values there. Then we're going to mix this noise texture with the multiply and actually not touch anything on this mix texture either. So here we go. We've got black on the right, white, black on the left, white on the right, and it looks like this gradient in the middle. So that's what we want. And just an aside here as well, if we, let's go back and look at this bottom part here. If we didn't have this gradient here, this mix would not work. I'll show you what I mean here. Let's duplicate this multiply, and I'm going to change this to less than or greater than would work. I'm going to choose less than, and let's take a look at this node. We can see that it's this black line now. Let's move this over to the middle, and let's go back to this mix. So instead of doing this middle line as a distorted part, it's just kind of adding in a noise texture on the left in the white side and the right in the black side. So that's just something I experimented around with, and I figured out that that's the easiest way to do it. Just make sure that there's a gradient there and the noise texture. Getting to the next step, what we're actually going to do is I'm going to get rid of this node here that's just hanging around, and I'm going to add in a node called the color ramp. So plug it into this area here, and this is going to act kind of similar to this multiply node. It's going to do a very similar thing. Just going to tighten this up a little bit. If I bring these values in, it just decreases that gradient. Basically, anything that was black is now whatever color is here. Anything that was gray is whatever color is in the middle, and anything that was white is going to be the color on the far right side. So as we bring these in, we just kind of crush any semblance of that gradient anymore. And this bottom value, I'm going to set this to 0.5. We can come into this field and set an exact value. And this white, I'm going to set to 0.595. You can change those around. That's just the two values I had in the original project I made, so I'm just trying to keep that the same. But if you change it around, it'll just change the way this looks, and it'll be a unique creation for you. So if you haven't already guessed, this image that we've got right here is going to be the factor between our two textures. I'm going to go ahead and set up something right now here. We're going to add in a mix shader, plug it into here, and this is actually going to go into the factor, and I'm going to just fix that there. And basically we're going to add in two principled BDSFs, and I'll just keep these out of the way for now, just like this. And this one here, we'll plug it into the bottom socket, and this one here we'll plug into the top socket. Hopefully that worked. Looks like it did. Great. I'll clean these up a little bit, see what's going on. Nope. And there we go. And so I'm just going to set these as some just basic values here. We'll set that right one as green. Actually, I'll just change it to the colors of my last thing. So the leather was kind of brown, and the grass was kind of green, dark green. Yeah, that looks good. So now what I'm going to do is set up a value node, it's called. This is actually a really useful node. It's super simple. It just stores a value, and I'm going to plug it in to the add shader here. So basically, whatever number this is just going to be the same number that was here. I can change this around, and I'll show you why this is useful. It's because you can plug this into multiple spots at once. So if I wanted to plug into that multiply at the same time, I could control both these values with one number. So I'm going to unplug this and just leave it plugged into the add node for now. And we're going to create the texture for the little strip in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and grab all of these nodes here at once, everything up to the color ramp there, and I'm just going to duplicate it and drag it down here. And now the reason we wanted this value node is we're going to actually plug this into this add on this side here as well. I'm just going to clean this up here so it looks a bit nicer to look at, and yeah, that looks much better already. We're actually not going to change anything with most of this bottom node group here. The only thing we're going to change actually is this color ramp. So instead of being this black to white, we're actually going to go black, white, black. So we're going to go to this plus here, click that, it's going to add in a new little slider here. I'm going to just move this to the right, and I'm just going to move this to pure black, just like that. We're going to set this first value to 0.391, and again, this is just what I did in my video there in my first project, but you can set these however you want. This is going to be 0.555 for the middle one. I'm just going to make sure that's pure white, and it is. And then this far right one, it's going to be set to 0.695. And there we go. We've got our middle strip set up there, and as we move this back and forth, it controls that middle strip, and it controls this texture separation here. So next up, we want to create kind of a color, or it could be a texture as well, for this middle strip. In this case, all I did was I used an emission shader, and I mixed it with a transparent shader with this image here as the factor. So I bring in a mix shader, not plug it into there, plug it into the factor, and I'll just stay plugged into there for a second for the viewer. So I'm just going to make sense of this here, and then I'm going to bring in a transparent shader, and an emission shader, just like that. And this top guy, this is going to be plugged into the top there, and then this bottom one into the bottom. Just move this around. Let's see what this looks like here. Yeah, if we change this color, this just controls the color of that glowing effect. So I set it to kind of an orangey gold color. You can change it to whatever you want. From this mix shader here, we're going to mix that with this one as well, which is the two textures. So I'm going to go ahead and just mix them together here. And the factor is actually, we're going to be using this right here, this image, this guy right here. So let's plug that in and see what that looks like. I'm going to make another separation here. It's getting a little weird to look at. Alright, that doesn't look too bad. And let's see what that looks like. Yeah, so now we've got the gold line in the middle, the texture 1 on the left, and texture 2 on the right. So we're going to set up the textures up top here now. And while highlighting this principled BDSF, if I have that Node Wrangler add-on installed that I talked about earlier, we can do something pretty cool with Control-Shift-T. Press those, and this is a texture I got off of Polygon for free. It's called Ground Forest, and I'm actually going to select a couple things at once here. I'm going to select the color, the normal map, and we're going to go with the gloss here as well. So set this, and it just imports this texture automatically for me. It's really a huge time saver to do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to use the same shortcut, Control-Shift-T. We're going to find another texture here. I'm just going to go ahead and find another one from Polygon. Let's see what we got here. why don't we do wood fine dark? And we'll go to this color here, and then we'll go to the gloss and the normal. Just go ahead and import everything. And that looks good. It's automatically inverted this roughness. Let's see what it's done there versus just this regular one. Yeah, that would probably be not nearly shiny enough. If we go back to the beginning of our node setup here, or close to, we set up this value node, and this is the value that we're going to animate to bring this thing across our object. The first frame we're going to set at is going to be with a value of 1.2, and it's going to be at frame 1. So if your timeline is in the middle, like 32, just bring it back to the beginning. You can hit Shift left arrow, and that brings it back to 1. And if we hover over this entry field, we can hit the I key, and it actually creates a keyframe for us. We should see this turn yellow. We should see a little diamond appear on frame 1, and this will only happen if we have this value node highlighted. So then we go to frame 110. I've just set it to 110 right here, and actually we could also have done that by holding down Shift and hitting right arrow, and that just brings us to the last frame in our timeline here. We're going to set this value now to 1.2 and then negative value. I don't know why I said it that weird. Negative 1.2. And again, just hover over this and hit I, and it'll turn yellow, and there should be a little keyframe that starts down here. Let's play our animation. We'll go back to the beginning there with Shift left arrow and hit spacebar, and it should play through our animation. So there we go. And if you recall from an earlier video, the way it sets up the animation is it uses a curve, and that curve starts slow, goes fast as in the middle, and then ends slow. And I'm going to change that. You could leave it as is if you want, but I like the look of this linear relationship a bit better. We're just going to change this to graph editor. That's what I did there, and hit A to select everything. And then you go ahead and hit V, and you go to vector. And that's it. That just straightened the curve there. So let's go ahead and play that again. I'm going to move this down and change it to timeline, and press spacebar. And it's a more consistent speed now. I just prefer this look. Next, let's add in the displacement. The way we do that is there's a couple steps here. What we're going to do first is add in a displacement node, and we're going to plug in this bottom area, which is just this white in the middle and black on the sides, and then a little slight gradient there. We're going to plug this into the height right here, just like that, and plug this into the displacement on this material output. We're going to leave the mid-level set as is, but we're going to change this to 0.05 for the scale. And if we go over here to the Render Properties tab, we've got to change this feature set to experimental and make sure we're on cycles. It has to be on cycles as well. Then come down here to the Materials Properties tab, and with this material selected, we're going to scroll down to Displacement. I guess I was already there. Where am I looking? No, wait, it's not displacement, pardon me. It's settings, and it's displacement under the settings. It's a little confusing. And you see this bump only. We're going to change this to displacement and bump. And if we look at the rendered view now, let's go ahead and look at this here. You can see it's not displaced yet. It's all the settings are there, except this is still just one plane, and there's no subdivisions. So let's take care of that. I'm going to go ahead and go into material view here for a second and tab into edit mode. We're just going to go subdivide, and I'm going to come down here. Let's go something like, I don't know, 30 subdivisions. So there we go. Now if we go into rendered mode, we should see it popping up for us. And there we go. Alright, so I'm getting this kind of weird artifact here. These little white flecks here. I don't really like the look of it, and I think it's coming from this texture. I'm just going to try and change that texture here. That's the bottom one. So let's go ahead and get rid of all of those nodes there. I'm going to select this principled shader and hit Control-Shift-T, and I've got this other one. It's a ground clay texture I'm going to set up instead. So I'm going to click that on. Let's see how it looks. Yeah, it seems to have fixed the problem, so I'm going to keep it at this texture instead. The last step I did is actually just kind of vary the points here of the landscape. It's actually probably better that we change the texture from that table because this will make it look a little bit more realistic anyways. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm just going to go ahead and tab into edit mode, and we've got all these points here. I've actually added a subdivision surface as well. You do that just by going to add modifier, subdivision surface, and I've set it to 3. Another quick way to do that is just go Control 3 on that top line of number keys, and that just adds one on here. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and turn on the proportional editing at the top here. You can either click right here, or you can just hit O, and that turns it on as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this to random on the right here. It should be set as smooth at the top. I've already changed it to random, so that's just what you want it at. Let's go ahead and grab one vertice just near the middle, and I'm going to go off of rendered mode so it doesn't slow down as much. I'm going to go ahead and just grab this along the Z axis by hitting G then Z, and I've got this circle of influence. I can't even see where it is, it's so big. There we go. So if you use your mouse wheel, you can scroll this smaller and bigger, and I'm going to basically just make it so it's just covering the top there, and I'm going to just bring this down a little bit. You could go nuts if you wanted. It's totally a personal choice. I'm just going to do pretty subtle here, just like this right here. And just tab back into object mode, and you can see that it's just kind of created a little bit of displacement just with that proportional editing. So that's it. We got our texture set up. It changes from one texture to the other, and it displaces with this interesting line here. I'm just in Material Preview mode, because if I was in render mode, it would just go a little too slow, and it would not really show as an animation. I'm gonna have to render this out. But yeah, hope you enjoyed that, and hope you can understand how you would customize it. Make it your own kind of thing. It's a lot of fun to play around with.